I am Phil Tursis, and I represent Abode's Development and Acorn Holdings, the developers of this site. And actually, let me, one more thing. The setbacks here, this is showing that dash line is the proposed 10-foot setback line, which is allowed as a special permit by zoning, and that's running along the two sides of the property. The by right setback for a 45-foot high building would be here, so that it would render the lot pretty much unbuildable for any kind of density. So we're asking for setback relief to basically to have this property line, this setback at the property line about 10 feet from our balconies, which would be at its closest about 15 feet from the building. There's no requirement for a setback in the front of the building, but as you'll see on our site plan in future slides, we are proposing at least a 6-foot setback, landscape setback here, and then there'll be an auto drop off here that'll show up in later slides. We're combining the two parcels together, and together they represent, with special permits, the maximum build allowed for both parcels. And originally, this was built with 54 units. It could have been built with 55. So we're transferring the extra unit from that project into this project for a total of 93 units in this project.
Okay, thank you. Can remind people of our general procedure for public testimony. There's a 3-minute time limit, so that everybody has a chance to speak. We have a timekeeper here. We'll indicate 3 minutes I'll ask. When you come up, please use the microphone, give your name and address, and spell your name so that it gets to the record. The first person on my list is Jan Devereaux.
My name is Jan Devereaux. That's Devereaux. I live on Lakeview Avenue. Thank you for your presentation. It's very thoughtful. I guess what I'd like to start off by saying is that I've lived in Huron Village since 1993. Huron Village, as many of you know, is the neighborhood that is sort of on the buffer zone of all of this immense growth going on. And I think it hadn't occurred to me before I heard the earlier Chun presentation, the irony of what's happening on either side of the sort of, whatever you want to call the quadrangle, the shopping center district, because one approach to the west, to the Belmont side, is to try to restrict townhouses. Huron Village has had townhouses for many years, but what we're getting is 93 units of very high density development on top of the other 54 that are already on the street. So it seems very different. I'm here tonight representing a newly formed group, which we're calling the Fresh Pond Residents Alliance. I suppose the delays of the 2 prior meetings have given us a little time to organize, but we really only formed 2 weeks ago. We've got over 50 members. We have an online petition opposing this project without significant infrastructure improvements and some rethinking about the density of the project. The petition, when I left home, had 180 signatures, over 180, and I have taken some of the comments and pasted them into a document to submit here. I think our group is united in our concern about the impact of this high density development around Fresh Pond. And we're worried about the massive growth that we think is bound to backfire in the absence of a master plan with very specific design guidelines and consideration for the impact on all the stakeholders in the community. That would be residents of all parts of Cambridge, and this is not an instance of NIMBYism. Every resident of Cambridge enjoys Danahy Park and Fresh Pond, and we want to keep it accessible. Large and small property owners, local businesses, and most importantly, the environment. This is our treasure, our city's treasure, the Fresh Pond area. And when we looked at that aerial map, I was struck by how close all of this development on New Street is to the edge of Fresh Pond. I think the project at 75 New Street, not to single it out, is somewhat of a lightning rod for our group, in part because, as people have mentioned, New Street was never envisioned as a residential street, and despite the promises of new sidewalks, along this stretch, it is impossible to walk the length of New Street without stepping out into the road. That's partly a sidewalk issue, that's partly an enforcement issue. We have cars parked on the sidewalk and across the sidewalk. The desire to call this a transit-friendly development is nice and idealistic, but to get to Alewife, you have to walk basically through the back of the shopping center parking lot. The Concord Alewife planning study talked about an actual road connection, and I suppose some sidewalks, but that has not been built, so it would be a long, dark, unsafe walk for most commuters.
If you could wind up your thoughts,
Okay, I'm
please.
sorry.
Thank you.
I guess I'd just like to say that I think this new street is sort of the tip of the iceberg. We have about 18 other new units in the pipeline for this area, and all of the piecemeal planning and the traffic studies that say that the impact will be negligible. I can't believe that. We're stuck in traffic all the time. So I guess in closing, I'd like to say that we residents, and we're a substantial number, would like a seat at the table and the chance to work collaboratively and productively with city officials and developers to balance everyone's interests, to preserve everyone's quality of life, and to protect everyone's open space resources. And I don't think that's asking too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Barnes on Nards.
Hi, I'm Margaret or Peggy Barnes Leonard, B-A-R-N-E-S-L-E-N-A-R-T. And I live at 115 Fairweather Street. It's on the corner of Bassel Lane and Fairweather. And I do use this road almost daily. So I have a lot of familiarity with it. And I appreciate the comments by the developers about wishing to add more green to the property, and certainly that would be a big improvement. I think the renderings are not what I know of the street. There is not really a sidewalk on the other side of the development, and the view of bikers, I'm not sure where they would be if there are cars. So we have been speaking to the need for an integrated plan for this area that really approximates more the vision that was presented by the study plans for the area. There's been a lot of work, and over the years, a lot of good lines have been brought to what to do with this some of the last open spaces left in Cambridge, how to develop it thoughtfully, how to create a livable, integrated, truly integrated commercial residential area. And I'm speaking as a very long-term resident from my heart that raised family here. I do have a lot of concerns about the pushing of the density and the special permitting that is allowing for the maximum amount of density, and I think it's to the jeopardy of the quality of life, the health, the safety of the environment. As developers have pointed out, Danahy Park is one of the citywide important resources to the city, and the main entrance is off the street. I have had children play soccer there, probably a lot of people have here too, and understand how school buses and this and that go down the street are impeded. I am having difficulty understanding how adding 93 more units, I think it would bring the residents to the street over 200. I'm not doing the math right. And with 140 parking spaces, that won't cause a problem. It's a short street. And I really invite everyone here on the City Council to come if you haven't, preferably on a weekday and during commuter hours, and come up and visit this area and look at the street and what kind of density makes sense. Also, I appreciated the developers were speaking to photovoltaic, possibly. Again, back to the need for an integrated plan. There's so many details about that, the bike path and entrance to Dennehy Park, preservation of Fresh Pond Reservoir, etc. That this could be an exciting development here, but I think going at it without an overlay, a review, integration with traffic.
Your time is up.
And my time is up. That I just would encourage the city to dial back on the density, and this is a concern all over the city. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Jonathan King.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board and staff. My name is Jonathan King, 40 Essex Street, Cambridge. I'm the co-chair of the Cambridge Residents Alliance. In coming here this evening, I'm trying to represent many families in Cambridge with school-age children. New Street is the major entrance to Dennehy Park. Dennehy Park is the city's major soccer field complex, serves thousands of families throughout all of Cambridge. It's also important for track, lacrosse, kite flying, many other outdoor activities. During spring, summer, and fall, many hundreds of young people need to get dropped off and picked up every day in the late afternoon, right around rush hour. The great majority use the New Street entrance. As I hope you know, the New Street intersection with the Fresh Pond Socio roundabout is one of the worst and most dangerous intersections in Cambridge. I still vividly remember my daily anxiety every afternoon when I had to get up there to New Street to pick up my kids and their teammates from soccer practice at Dennehy. Even worse was trying to describe to other parents coming in from Route 2 or Route 16 how to get into New Street without putting themselves at lethal risk. Worse than that was the anxiety over teenagers insisting on biking to Dennehy using Ringe Avenue, Fresh Pond Parkway, or Concord Avenue to get into the street. Because the drawings show no 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds biking along there or skateboarding, or their parents driving them. Now, even for those, you might think, well, why do the kids have to be driven? The Alewife T-stop is up there. Why can't they get there that way? So even for those families and kids who have red line access, most of the young athletes are driven because of the dangers inherent in walking across the movie, across the parking lot, scrambling up the embankment to get to Fresh Pond Parkway, crossing over the overpass, and then having to cross the entrance to Route 2 across from Alewife Brook. And of course, when you're 14 years old, you can't resist the possibility of just jump the fence and cross the tracks and cut some distance off. So if there ever was a section of Cambridge, and I'm talking about someone from Central Square who has intense feelings about planning, but if there ever was a section of Cambridge that needed an infrastructure plan, it's this area, given the intense usage by children and families. Now, most of us citizens of Cambridge have been led to understand that it is the planning board that at least is the spiritual, maybe not the organizational leader for such planning, and that we really need you to call upon CDD or traffic and parking to come up with an infrastructure plan that makes that area safer. I really appreciated the efforts of the architects to treat that property as respectfully as possible. But the traffic effects are completely nonlinear when it comes to 4, 5, and 6 o'clock in that intersection. You get 6 or 7 more cars there, right? And it's a disaster. And the traffic analysis averages over an 8-hour day. So, thank you. So we would ask you Every special permit or other okay to add vehicular traffic in the street increases the danger to our young people and their families, whether driving, biking, or walking. Hold off on these special permits until the city can come up with an infrastructure plan and you can implement it. And then that'll be time to look at adding density there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker lives at 140 Spring Street, but I can't read their name. Is there somebody who lives at 140 Spring Street? beside that?
140, Ilan Levy.
Could be.
Ilan Levy, last name Levy.
What was the first one?
Ilan, I-L-A-N. I live at 148 Spring Street in East Cambridge, and I'm here, I'm also a member of the newly formed Neighborhood Association of East Cambridge, and I'm here to speak in support of the stand of the Fresh Pond Residents Alliance. The formerly industrial site of J.C. Adam Windows is not well suited for residential use, and the proposed development is too dense in the absence of a significant improvement of the street and sidewalk infrastructure in and out of Saussure Rotary to Concord Ave and through the shopping center to connect Alewife Parkway and the MBTA Red Line station. I go there on a regular basis on Sunday to walk my dog. The traffic is horrendous on the Sunday, so I cannot imagine what it is at peak hours during the week, and I think that, as has been very well said by Jonathan King, the traffic impact is going to be exponential and therefore detrimental to the area. So I would also request that you hold on this permit until the infrastructure has been adapted to support such a development. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Stephen Kaiser.
Again, for the record, my name is Steve Kaiser. I live at 191 Hamilton Street. The Fresh Pond Residents Alliance also has a website where they show a very interesting montage of photographs of what they consider is going wrong at Alewife. Evidence of bad design, bad planning, this sort of thing. I think it's very revealing. It reflects a lot of their concerns. And it has a few omissions, a couple of omissions that I think are important, and I will mention some of those. But their general concern is that the quality of planning here has been bad. And I'm inclined to agree. The last really good plan that I know of that was ever done for Alewife was done by John Freeman in 1904. We haven't got any better than that. Now, there is an effort going on in the city which is very good, which is a vulnerability study. And they're looking at the possibilities of hurricanes and the damage that major events like this and global warming could have. And they're using Army Corps studies to show what happens to Alewife if Boston area gets hit by a Category 1 hurricane. And the Mystic River backs up, it floods severely. And so you have a flooded area from Spy Pond in Arlington all the way down to Fresh Pond, all water. It's what I call Lake Alewife during the hurricane. This means New Street is underwater. So I know that the board has interests and concerns in zoning about flooding. So I really think you should be looking at this area and its vulnerability, as the rest of the city is doing it. City government is doing. It's going to take a change, and FEMA has to wake up because their maps are not accurate. They don't reflect hurricanes. So let us try and see what we can do to make this understanding of flooding better. Now, there's another flooding thing that happens almost every day, and that's the flood of traffic. The sea of cars, all right? And is it up and down the parkway? Is it up and down the side streets? And it is clearly at capacity, simply because things are just not moving. It is getting worse. And the development close to key intersections is getting so intense, it's screwing up the key bottlenecks. So we have less capacity and more cars. It's the only area in the city I know where there's congestion and backups peak hour at noontime. So now we've got 3 peak hours in Alewife, and the traffic is stalled on the parkway in both directions. The plan that was done in, let's see, almost a decade ago, 2005. This is the original plan. This is the rezoning petition. The rezoning petition is dated April 2005. The plan is dated later, November 2005. The zoning comes before the plan. It's exactly backwards. And CDD officials tell me, oh, we know it's backwards, but we've always done it that way. And they admit even the plan is 80% zoning. So you have a package here which is 90% zoning and only 10% plan.
Could you wind up your thoughts,
Yes, I will.
Steve? Thanks.
Okay? So what we really need to do here, we need improved planning. I think we need a 5-year moratorium on all development at Alewife because it's been so badly handled and the traffic is an obvious mess. It's a disgrace. 2005 plan did not include for infrastructure. It was in favor of development. But for this specific project, by the way, I think the architectural treatment is excellent. This could be an excellent building somewhere else, but not here. Let us enforce the zoning as a minimum. There should be no reductions in the zoning, no grants of special treatment to anybody, and no variances to Alewife until we solve the planning and the traffic problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Sure.
My name is Jay Yesselman, Y-E-S-S-E-L-M-A-N. I live on Vassal Lane. Been a proud resident of Vassal Lane for 30 years. Lived actually for 40 years in Vassal Lane. And I think everybody here can acknowledge, at least I hope, that there's a huge traffic mess out Alewife onto Route 2. It boggles the mind to think this won't add to it. But more than that, I would like just to reinforce what everybody has said about infrastructure and planning. If you take a look at New Street, I know there is a preference and we want to add a residential area down there, but I think it's just hard to believe we can't do better, that we're just going to plop these things up there. If you take a look at the 87 part, which they didn't show there, you would see that that thing was just put up so carelessly with no concern for what the park area looks like. This is an improvement and does show a little sensitivity, but if that thing at 87 Park is going to be there for how long? 50 years? 100 years? We're going to be stuck with it. I would just urge that this committee take heed to what people are saying about planning and thought. I mean, what's getting built there, we have to live with for years to come. Our kids have to live with for years to come. So please take care with the city. We must all really love, because we're here for the purpose of making wise decisions and expressing opinions. And it's up to you, wise gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Seth Teller, T-E-L-L-E-R. I reside at 281 Hurley Street in East Cambridge. Here in solidarity with my neighbors to the west, really with a general plea and a couple of specific pleas, and they are about infrastructure. I'm actually, I love thinking about infrastructure. One of the things I've noticed about infrastructure is it's really appreciated most when it goes away. And that's often through disasters. You know, you have a flood that washes something, a bridge away or something, and everybody gets terribly upset. But another way that the need for infrastructure can become acute is through unplanned growth, when what was an annoyance to just a few people previously suddenly becomes an annoyance to a lot of people. And that, I think, is what is unfolding here in slow motion. And I wanted to make two just concrete observations about how it's unfolding. If I may I back up on the slides? Thank you so much. Just to the picture you had of the plan view, showing the market and the parking lot. It's got to be on here somewhere.
Keep going.
Did I pass it?
Yeah.
Here?
Is that
Sure. And I think I can do this here. If you met, yes, thank you. No, next time I'll bring my own. Thank you so much. I just wanted to speak to the point someone made earlier about walking over to the T. Because if you start out here and you have a sense of direction, you think, well, I just want to do that. But what do you actually have to do? Well, if it's during the daytime, you can actually, there's a little cross thing here. You can, first of all, you're over here on New Street, so you have to go all the way around to get to here somewhere. Then you can either sneak through here, or you can go under and walk around this thing and come up on this sidewalk and go that way. Or you can climb up the bank and down the other side, which I'm sure 14-year-olds do. I don't do it. Or you can come around here, walk on this side and cross over. But the point is, you can't get there from here. And that's something that bothers a lot of people who try to use the T and be mindful of it. It's annoying, frankly, to walk an extra 10 minutes when the thing you want to get to is right over there. That's one. The second concrete plea is about driving along the street, which I do also occasionally. I do use Danny a lot. And whatever happened when this thing was built to the streetscape was not thought through, because it used to be that there wasn't parking along there, and then all of a sudden there was. And now to drive in this direction, you're forced, the street just isn't wide enough. I don't know who did that, but you're all of a sudden forced into oncoming traffic.
The next slide, the upper
The next slide, thank you so much. So,
It's the slide with the photographs. There's a photograph of the parked car.
okay.
I'll go the other way.
The other way, thanks.
Right there, upper left. Back one. Upper left, that car is parked.
Okay, this one, yeah. Okay, yeah, you can see it here. So you're driving along, and there's a bike lane's worth of space right there, and you got to get your whole car into it, and someone's coming in the other way, and you're taking your life into your hands. And when it's busy, it's even worse. So the plea here is just echoing what Ms. Devereaux and others said after. Just stuffing this thing into this place that's not prepared for it will exacerbate these issues, and you'll get a lot of really upset people, hundreds of calls to the traffic and parking department, and people complaining about, thank you so much, about the Alewife infrastructure. So a plea to think that through beforehand, and actually I think it would save everybody a whole lot of time and aggravation to get it right beforehand rather than in fits and starts for decades after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Camacho. I live at 24 Corporal Burns Road in the house that my husband was born in. And there have been a lot of changes, many of them good over the years. I want to thank Acorn and Abodes for their presentation, and also to the planning board for the opportunity to speak. And I'm not so specifically going to speak about the project. It's more the area that the project is in, because again, you've heard it before, I'm talking about infrastructure in the area. It currently doesn't exist to support the project. And to give you just a little bit of an idea, at the J&C Adams building, for example, on New Street, which is where you can see this car here, when the car is parked 6 inches from the curb, which is legal and reasonable, you have 7.5 feet from the outer edge of the tire of that car to the yellow line in the middle of the street. 7.5 feet, that's not even 8 feet for a car that is going down. And then you also have cars coming. You also have bicycles. You also have people with strollers. So the street itself is not wide enough right now to handle the traffic. There's something needs to be done about that. At the J&C Adams building, the building currently comes to the edge of the sidewalk, as you can see on this photo, and the sidewalk is 6 feet 9 inches wide. At the poles, it's 5 feet wide. And then the sidewalk that's on the park side is 5 feet 3 inches wide. So between the width of the street and the width of the two sidewalks right there, you don't have enough room to put what the abodes people are hoping to capitalize on, which is going to be pedestrian and bike traffic. There's no room for a bike lane, there's no room for strollers, there's no room for somebody disabled. Right now it's extremely dangerous. So the streets and the walks there make the driving dangerous. That's what I just tried to point out. It needs addressing now before there is something permanently built there where you have no ability for a give and take for widening the sidewalks, widening the street, putting in your bike lane to be able to link up with the linear path. There are also my concerns about this project going in here now that feed directly into the larger picture of Cambridge development. Visionary planning years ago turned the dump into a premier park in the city, and it's used, as people have already said, by many school and community groups. The 2005-2006 Concord Alewife study listed many recommendations in the West and North Cambridge area that have benefited everyone, such as connecting of some of the bike paths over behind the Alewife Tea Station. That is wonderful. You can get to Linear Park, all different kinds of places. However, the vision as a livable Cambridge is starting to get sidetracked. Of all the areas, for example, of all of the areas that were addressed in the Concord Alewife study, New Street and the shopping center mall area are the only ones where none of the recommendations for infrastructure were implemented. And so putting a large project in this, I'm sure you all have this, but this is a map here from page 35 of the study, and this is where the shopping center was, and this is the infrastructure that was supposed to be built in the shopping center to make this area tie in to be more pedestrian friendly and bike friendly.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay.
Just finish up your comments,
Okay,
please.
I certainly will. Besides the lack of improvements, there is an opportunity to link up bike paths that benefit everyone, and it's real tight behind there. Some places, there's no more than 5 feet between the chain link fence and the rails. So come the time that we hope to get a bike path there, if there's already a large project there that has taken up all of the space, there's going to be no way for any kind of a leeway to link up the bike path along with all of these other bike paths that have already been developed in Cambridge. So please think very carefully about what goes in there now. It'd be wonderful to have something in there, just not so that it hamstrings the planning board so that we can't do those things later. Thank you very much.
Spell your last name, please.
C-A-M-A-C-H-O.
Thank you.
Hi, Kathy Hoffman, 67 Pleasant Street in Cambridgeport. Really just here to lend my support to the people of Fresh Pond and to make an observation which perhaps is obvious in under 3 minutes. And that is that the people who have put a great deal of time and energy, and it's their self-interest to build this building, had a very significant and unlimited time in which to present it. And that makes sense. They put a lot of time and energy into it, and so they're going to present it in the best light they possibly can. That's what they're there to do. The people who are reacting to it have 3 minutes to react to it. And I guess one of the recommendations I have is several. One is it would be wonderful for the people who have developed the website in Fresh Pond to have 20 minutes or 25 or 30 minutes in which to present the information that they have accumulated and for people to benefit from it. I'm sitting here with enormous gratitude to Ms. Camacho, to Mr. King, to others who have spoken, Steve Kaiser, all adding little tiny bits of information, which as volunteers, they have gone and scoured and put together. Some of it is a little bit our own experience, driving down New Street, seeing what it's like, going to Dennehy Park, going that little back way into the thing. But these are sort of individual experiences, and then people with enormous amounts of information. But to have it sort of restricted in little sound bites and not allow you all the benefit of a much fuller analysis, I think is problematic. And so I don't know how the planning board can think about addressing it. For me, one of the resources that I hope you may put at our disposal in postponing a decision on this, because I think you've heard enough to realize that the infrastructure isn't sufficient, and if we go ahead and say yes to this building, then we're really going to be in trouble, is whether some of Community Development Department resources could be put to doing some of the traffic analysis, doing some of the infrastructure analysis, and being able to have the opportunity at one of these meetings to take the same amount of time to make a real presentation of what are the struggles that need to be addressed here. Because I'm sure that the developers are interested in creating buildings which in fact will be an asset to the neighborhood and not become a significant obstacle. So that's just my observation, and thank you for listening, and I hope you will create opportunities, both the gentlemen and the gentlewomen on the planning board, to pursue this further.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ron Peden, P-E-D-E-N. I live at 25 Aberdeen, which is, I believe, just a short distance from Huron Village. I agree with one of the speakers that conceptually the project is probably sound, and I wouldn't have a problem with it under different circumstances. Although I do think that the concerns of a lot of the community groups and residents are legitimate. There's not really anything that I can add to that, but the one concern that I have about it is probably best labeled as a policy argument, and that is the effect that it will have on the social fabric of the community, specifically the growing wealth and income gap not only in this community, but basically in this country. It's a huge problem, in my opinion. I think that this project and the developers are basically the epitome of that. And I know this panel probably feels it has no responsibility for dealing with those kinds of social issues, but unfortunately I have to disagree, because I think as the arbiters or the guardians of where the profits flow in this city from projects such as this, I think if this particular panel doesn't take any responsibility for addressing those issues, then I think we have no chance of addressing it at all.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Thank you, Charles Teague, 23 Edmund Street. Speaking as Vice President of the Association Cambridge Neighborhoods, I would say that what you're hearing is not about, criticisms aren't really about this project. It's this is, let's say, approximately going from 2,400 units to 2,500 units in the past several years. What's been permitted, what's coming in Alewife, what's been built recently, and that's what's really about. It's all about, and it's really about planning. And so I was just going to remark upon the difference between what is on the city website as a master plan and what Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81D, requiring a master plan with 9 elements. And so the first one we have, which is goals and policies, but that's 7 years old. Land use and the relation of density and intensity to capacity and services, I think that's what you've been listening to. Housing policies and strategies for all local citizens, for local housing for all citizens. No one's mentioned the affordable housing here. Economic development, natural and cultural resource protection, open space protection, we've heard a little about that. Services and facilities forecast is the seventh element. A really important one, which you've all been hearing about, the inventory of existing and proposed circulation and transportation systems. And everybody's saying, well, it's really bad now, what's the plan? And there is no plan. And then finally, implementation, and to quote directly, scheduled expansion or replacement of public facilities or circulation system components and the anticipated costs and revenues associated with the completion of such activities shall be detailed in this element. And we certainly don't have that. And finally, to quote directly from the text, such a plan shall be a statement through text, maps, illustrations, and other forms of communication that is designed to provide a basis for decision-making regarding the long-term physical development of the municipality. So, it's not my ambition to sound like Steve Kaiser, but since we don't have a master plan, there is no basis for granting permits, and this has to get fixed. You know, it's not about this project. I actually think that this particular project only butts up against going to the growth policy document, which we do have, butts up against policy 15 and 23, which both cite safe pedestrian and bicycle environments, which this does not do from the testimony. But right here, right now, I don't expect you to stop all development, though I think in this area, I think that's appropriate. But just to close, is they're combining the lots and the building rights with the existing building, and we've heard commentary upon the lack of landscaping of the existing building. That is within your purview. You can insist upon improving that landscape plan.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Dennis Carlone, Carlone, 9 Washington Avenue. People have spoken very wisely tonight, and I won't repeat many of their great comments, at least not try to. But there seems to be some commonalities that are worth talking about. Making a neighborhood takes a great effort. Whether or not the city is involved in this, it's making a neighborhood, the beginning of a neighborhood street. And the public domain is key. Now, that's not what's being discussed tonight, but your recommendation to the city, including to the council, that this needs to be looked at as an example of what needs to be done in other neighborhoods goes a long way. It's like Essex Street, the previous discussion. Just your saying that it makes sense to widen the sidewalk beyond 5 foot 6 inches in Central Square sends a message. So I'm asking you for that. Infrastructure, I happen to be the chairman of the infrastructure committee. This will be brought up as you would want us to bring it up. But again, your recommendation helps. Master plan. There's no doubt we're going to discuss this on the council. There are 7 neighborhoods that have contacted us, this being one, that have asked for this, and they're citing these kinds of issues. Now, I know the city is looking at New Street. I know Brian and his staff has met with the mayor to discuss this. So the process is going. What I suggest that you at least talk about in reference to this project is that the street, it be considered that the street is widened, the public way is widened away from this project. Yes, it involves the park. I know that's a big issue. But it doesn't include taking down any trees. There are parking lots primarily on the other side of New Street. And it can incorporate a bike path, better pedestrian ways, better tree planting opportunities. The 4-story buildings need major trees to make it feel residential. I think Mr. Payette has done a very nice design with very limited materials. Once again, we're dealing with concrete materials like on Essex Street. And to paint it the same colors, even though it's broken up, for 450 feet seems unurban to me. And I know you generally don't get into colors, but I mean, just look at your colors. There's a range that feels like a combination of people. 450 feet, I believe, is a mini destroyer. So in the end, the industrial zone, I don't understand why that's not being looked at. And maybe that comes out of a master plan study that the neighbors have asked for. I do think the design is a vast improvement over the previous building, which looks more like a temporary dormitory. But the landscape does seem weak, and it's because the building is so tight. In the industrial zone, as the developer mentioned, there's no setback requirement. That right there tells you something. Thank you for your time. So anything the planning board says helps the council move forward. It's not always the other way around where you have to think, how are we going to work with what the council has said? It's you help us. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Claudia Majetic. The last name is spelled M-A-J-E-T-I-C-H. And I live at 329 Concord Ave. I was very, I use New Street all the time because it's right down the block for me, to get to the shopping district, which was mentioned in the presentation.
Can you speak
And,
into the mic? We can't
oh,
hear
I'm
you.
sorry. And people have talked a lot about infrastructure, and when I think about infrastructure, I think about the streetscape that everybody's talking about. But nobody's talked about commercial infrastructure. And I'm a big fan of density. I grew up in New York City. I learned to drive when I was 30. I spent my entire life on subways and literally got into cars once or twice a year. What's interesting about this development is that there's no commercial development. There's no commerce. And to me, a cityscape has got more going on it than 450 feet of walls with some windows on it. Because I'll tell you, I haven't seen one person go in and out of that other building on New Street, and I go down that street all the time. I thought it was empty for the longest period of time. And I think the other thing that's interesting, just from my own personal experience, is I live between Fairweather and Walden. That's what, a third of a mile over to Fresh Pond? I drive every single solitary time. Why? Because, to Jonathan King's point, it is dangerous. And the only thing that produces that, in my opinion, the only thing that makes density work is if you really have a place where it's interesting to people to walk, it's safe for people to walk. And this doesn't address any of it. And also, when people are making the plea for infrastructure, my point is that it's not just better roads or better access, it's what you put on the roads. And it's not just the 450-foot building. If you walk around Manhattan, you'll see that all of those very exciting neighborhoods may have 40 stories up, but they've got retail on the ground floor. That's true in Brooklyn, it's true in Queens, it's true in Manhattan. It's what makes the city walkable. And so if you are thinking about infrastructure, I think you need to think of it more broadly rather than just transportation, but more like what makes a place really work. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay, I see no one. What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, it's 10 till 10. I don't think it's a good time to deliberate.
And I don't think it's a good time for a break. So I would think that if we're not deliberating, we're not breaking, that we're going to deliberate at a later meeting. And my typical question at this time is then, what additional information would we like the development department to bring forward so that our deliberation can be more fruitful? And I have some ideas, but I'll wait and see what other people have. You'll get them all.
You can start with that. if the convergence of the bicycle paths and the pedestrian paths on all sides of this target area, so to speak, if we could understand where those paths are and what it would take to connect them, and I'd also like some information on how real is the public ownership of the railroad right-of-way. Is that something that we can aspire to, or is that really just off the table? And then I would also like some information on, and maybe this is really something that we can do ourselves, but I think we need a clear idea of how accessible the red line is to folks living in this part of the. I think there's other comments, but that's what I have for now.
Tom?
Sure, I have a few notes. I have some questions on the development of the landscape that I'd like some clarity on. I did notice that one of the views that's presented to the public way is of the transformer and the dumpster. I thought maybe there was another way to reconfigure that site so it could be tucked in behind the building, so that isn't what we see. Question about no irrigation in the landscape, going to rely on rainwater. That might be fine, but maybe there's some way to collect that rainwater and pump it to the plants so that they survive in the event of a drought. I think that limits the type of plant material that might be in the site. I would like some further understanding of the dimensions of the street. I really appreciated the testimony of somebody who's obviously taken a yardstick or a tape measure out there and measured all the dimensions, which clearly proved that the street probably isn't working the way we need it to work. So I guess I want to understand that, especially in light of Councilor Carlone's suggestion that there's been some thought about changing the dimension on that street. So I'd love for community development to catch us up on what the latest thinking is there. I think that those are my thoughts initially. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, our tables are straight tonight, so I can't see
Right. Okay, so I'll start with the low water table in that area, and considering the basement garage. I'd like to see a little more detail as to how they decide how they're going to actually stay dry, considering to where it is and how it is at wetlands and so on and so forth. I'd like to see an elevation view of the rooftop units. I used to teach or coach soccer, U10s and 12s, and there's a lot of people doing all kinds of stuff across New Street, such as meditation or whatever it is, and so I just wondered about the rooftop units. Elevation, it's really close up there. And you wanted a relief on a parking space 10 feet closer to the building, and what is that parking space for that you wanted to relieve?
Actually,
you don't have to answer this right now.
Sorry.
I'm just putting questions out there. And aside from that, I'm all for residential. I think of this building somewhat very massive in that particular small street, as well as I've imagined this is one of the last urban wild between Fresh Pond and Danny Heat and also Discovery Park. It seems to be massive buildings are getting closer and closer to suffocate this urban wild that we have. And so I respect property rights, I respect developers. There's nothing I can do, and I'd much rather have a residential building than what's there now. But if it was any possible to put more trees and cut off the massive of the building possibilities, I would like to see that. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to follow up on information about the street widening.
with also information about the possibility of widening the sidewalks. I'm sorry. And well, the developer finally said the magic word, 3-bedroom units. And so I would like a lot more information about that. What is the possibility of 3-bedroom units? I think a mix of just 1 and 2 bedrooms is not appropriate. We've been trying to get more families and housing for more families, and I think that's a really significant issue that I'd like to get information about. I think that's really the issues I have. Oh, I'm sorry, the one other issue, there was a reference to the traffic being generated from this not being much more than the traffic that's being generated by J.C. Adams. And I would like more information about what J.C. Adams traffic is right now. And, well, they're closed now, yes, I understand that. But I'd like some information on what the historical traffic was from that site.
Could I have 3 more pieces, please? I'd like to know a little bit more about the numbers of new units that are forthcoming or permitted but not yet built in that area that we're focusing on, the quadrangle and the Alewife T. I also would like, and I think the proponent can be helpful with this as well, the space behind your property that's used by the auto body is used to store junk cars. It's not a parking lot. So I think some clarification about how that auto body shop is using that space would be good for all of us to know in the city. And I also think that, and the proponent can really lend a hand here as well in bringing together design or suggestions for better connections to the park, to the theaters, to the shopping centers. And I got a wake-up call for all of this in here about the traffic. This is a regional issue. It doesn't have to do with Burlington or Woburn or Cambridge or Boston. This region passed a tipping point about a year or so ago. Every single driver in this region is in trouble when we're in our vehicles. We're all in traffic jams. It's a regional problem. We can't solve it in Cambridge. It has to be a larger solution. And just to really scare everybody, I want you to think about who's our leaders on this issue on Beacon Hill. Who's coming forward to really bring all of us together and acknowledge the problem and help us to solve this problem. If you want to hear the crickets, go stand up anywhere in the State House and ask who's providing leadership on this issue.
I'd like to see some of the close-up of the building materials and also what colors they are. I think in the display, the pictures there, they were a little faded out. I'm not sure they were accurate, so I'd like to see that. I have questions about the chain link fence, who it belongs to. If that thing comes down, then would the people living in that in that residence be able to just walk across to Whole Foods? There's a chain link fence that goes down there. I'm getting a questioning look from you.
Maybe. I'm not sure where that fence is, but maybe Phil knows. I just want to be able to reply.
The fence along the railroad right away?
Yeah.
I believe that's owned by the railroad.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. Also, I'd like to get a traffic analysis from Sue Clippinger. And in terms of the watering system for the plants, if you plant plants or trees or whatever there, and you get 3 weeks in the summer when we don't have any rain, I can attest to this, they're going to die. So you need to, my feeling is that you need to come up with some sort of a watering system for the plants for this particular development. I'd like to see some more trees in there also. And I have other things to say too, but I'm going to let it go there.
Couple of comments for another board members. Request that you address the issues with the street. One thing I'd also like to hear about, though, is what are the parking rules currently on the street, and what is the actual usage? And maybe this is something you can talk to CDD or the city about, because one of the concerns that we've seen and heard is that by virtue of the parking practices, there are constraints on the use of the road. And when I say what is the actual practice, who's actually parking there? Is it users of the park, or is it residents of the new structures there? It was a rhetorical question for you. One other thing, I'd like to pick up on Councilor Carlone's comments about the landscaping. My sense, like his, is that the landscaping for this building is actually critical in this location, and I agree that trees here, as in most places, are absolutely essential to the character, especially with a four-story building like this. I love the photos of the plants that you have, but I agree it looks kind of thin on there, and it's tight, and I guess I would just like to hear what the ramifications would be to your proposal if you increased the setback somewhat, or at least in that portion of the building which is close to the street, to give a little bit more room and for trees and opportunity for somewhat of a greater density of landscaping up front. I think the landscaping makes the break or breaks. So the renderings are wonderful, but we all know that renderings are always wonderful. I'm trying to imagine what the reality will be. Thank you.
And just one more question that I have. I'd like to see a better pedestrian view from the sidewalk of the drawings. Something that's a little bit more pedestrian, what the pedestrians are going to be actually looking at.
Okay. The only thing I would add to this very long list is something that has been asserted there's been no planning out here. I don't believe that's correct. So if you could just make us a list of the various planning efforts that have been taking place. I mean, is it true that there's been no neighborhood planning in this area or in the areas that are next to it? I mean, I know the effort that was done represented by that map. And also with that, an evaluation of where you think more planning is needed, that needs to be looked at. We've obviously identified some areas here. If there is nothing else, then we will.
One more thing. I'm sorry. Just one of the photos showed a power line, a pole right in the middle of the sidewalk, small sidewalk that we have. So what your plans are as you redo the sidewalk, if you were going to reroute the electricity going from that pole to whether demolition of that pole, I'd like to see it.
Okay. All right, so we will discuss this at a later date. Liza will schedule that date and let us all know if you've signed up on this list. She will contact you directly if you want to be directly. Thank you for your